Tonight's topic is not as controversial, perhaps, as the topics that we've covered in the past. But in my opinion, it's no less interesting because I learned a lot trying to research this. This shiur comes about as a result of my discovery when moving to the Bayit that the minhag of the shul has been for a number of years not to say Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh. And it was one of the more intriguing minhagim because I've never been before to a shul which doesn't say Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh. And so it sort of got me thinking. I even emailed Rabbi Taub, and I asked Rabbi Taub, I said, I'm very intrigued by this minhag. Can you shed some light on it? And he sent me back a makar from the Magen Avraham, which we're going to see in just a second. He said, but really, he doesn't remember why he decided to institute this practice. And he feels that perhaps it is appropriate to institute the Borchi Nafshi for Rosh Chodesh. I wanted to say that at the outset and dedicate this shiur in honor of Rabbi Taub, who was so instrumental in getting me going in putting together this shiur. And hopefully maybe he'll even get a chance to see this on Kosher Tube and get a little nachas. In any event, so I wanted to trace with you where the minhag, Borchi Nafshi is kapitel Kuf Dalet. It's Psalm 104 in the book of Tehillim. And it is actually a very, very beautiful kapitel. It really talks about all different components of creation. Those of you who are with us from Mincha and Ma'ariv know that we're learning Chovos Levavos, and Rabbeinu Bechaya goes into this whole long chapter about how it's important for a person to investigate the Bria, to investigate Hashem's world, in order to come to a greater appreciation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And certainly that's really what Kapitel Kuf Dalet, the Borchi Nafshi, is all about, that my soul will bless Hashem after coming to a realization that all of nature is interconnected and that there's a universal soul that permeates the entire universe, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really connects everything together and is the source of everything that's glorious and beautiful in this world, and really truly wondrous and majestic. But where do we get this minhag to recite Borchi Nafshi, and specifically why at Rosh Chodesh? So this is the thing that we're going to look at tonight, and will take us in a few other different directions. The earliest reference that I was able to find for saying Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh is from a sefer called Sefer HaManhig, which was written by Rabbi Avraham ben Nassan Hayarchi. He was known as Hayarchi, the moon guy, I guess is what you would call him, because he came from a town called Lunel in Italy. And Lunel is Luna, right? It's the moon. So sort of a play on word. They called him Hayarchi because he came from Lunel. And he lived in the early 13th century. And he writes that he says, Ra'isi minhag tov, and it's at the very, very top of your sheet. Ra'isi minhag tov b'Tulitula. Anyone know where the city of Tulitula is?
Toulouse.
No. It's actually the Jewish term, the medieval Jewish term for the city of Toledo in Spain. And the question, there's a lot of speculation as to why the Jews in the medieval period called Toledo Tulitula. Some say that it has to do with the fact that it was like Tiltula is wandering in Aramaic. So it could be the fact that Jews had wandered there, and it was a very common custom for Jews to rename the cities where they were living. Right? In other words, this used to be Torornto or Vaughan. We call it Thornhill, right? So maybe there's a reason for that. But in any event, he says, this is now the Italian Rav writing about a minhag that he saw the Jews of Toledo, Spain practicing. And he writes that he says, I saw a beautiful minhag that in Tulitula uvesavivo sehem, and in their environs, lomar achar hatfila mizmorim lefi inyan hayamim, to say kapitelach of Tehillim that are connected in some way thematically to the theme of the day in which they are being said. B'chol tefila l'David, hatei Hashem ozmecha aneni. That during a regular weekday, they would say that the kapitel of Tehillim that starts with the prayer to David, please God incline your ear and answer my prayers. Al Shem ki gadol ataveos eniflaos, and the reason is because every day we want to acknowledge God's greatness, who makes wonders, which is included in that kapitel Tehillim. Uchesiv b'pitaron habrachot alu mafli la'asot, and it also writes that God, who answers the blessings or provides blessings, that He is wondrous in His creation. And it also says, please God, instruct me or show me your ways. So this is a beautiful idea for a person when after he's concluded his davening on a daily basis to say a kapitel that really sort of reaches out to Hashem and asks him to touch us in some way. But then he says, Uva Rosh Chodesh, but I noticed that the minhag in Toledo is that every Rosh Chodesh they say, Borchi Nafshi es Hashem v'gomer. And why do they do that? Dichsiv bei asa yoreach l'mo'adim, that God has created the sun for mo'adim, for the purpose, God has created the moon for the purpose of the festivals. In other words, to help us calculate when the festivals come out. The Yetziras Bereshis, and it also contains within it an entire discussion of creation, God's creation of the universe. And of course, Rosh Chodesh is a time of rejuvenation, recreation, the moon coming back to its beginning cycle. And therefore, this is a time not only to reflect upon that one pasuk of Asa Yareach Mo'adim, that God has created the moon for the festivals, but also a time to reflect upon the act of creation in general on Rosh Chodesh. He says, Uvechol HaMoadim, he says, I notice, and on Chol HaMoed, they do Ka'ayol Tarog, that the kapitel that starts off like a gazelle that skips over the pools of water, because it says in that kapitel, B'kol Rina V'toda Hamon Chogeg, it says in the pasuk, in that paragraph, that the populace celebrates with a joyous voice, okay? And it's reminiscent of the joyous voice that was heard in Jerusalem during the festivals. And Uvachanukah Mizmor Shir Chanukahis Abayis L'David. That on Chanukah in Toledo, they would say at the end of davening, Mizmor Shir. That sounds like a familiar minhag, right? Do we do that here at the Bayit?
Yeah.
On Chanukah, do we say at the end of davening, Mizmor Shir Chanukahis Abayis L'David?
No.
No? Have you ever davened at a shul where that's done?
Everywhere else.
Everywhere. All right. It seems to be a pretty prevalent minhag. Yes?
Maybe that's another one.
Well, I think you're going to see that they're all interconnected. Okay? Now, Shagamanu Korim B'Parshios Chanukas Habayis Kol Yemei Chanukah. And the reason is because on Chanukah, we read about the consecration of the Mishkan and the consecration of the temple. And so therefore, Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis LeDavid is an appropriate kapitel to recite on Chanukah. Uvepurim ala yeles hashachar shemedaber me Esther kedisa b'megillah nikres. That on Purim, and this I have never seen done, there's a special kapitel at the end of the davening on Purim morning, which is Lam Natseach ala yeles hashachar, which talks according to the Gemara about Esther Hamalka, Kidisa, and it says, like it says in the Gemara, Lamna nimshula Esther la'ayelet, because why is Esther compared to a gazelle? V'chein hadas nota la'asos v'chein yashar be'enai. He says, it makes so much sense to do this, and it is correct in my eyes to institute this practice. So what's interesting is that you see from Rabbi Avraham ben Natan HaYarchi that this was not a widespread practice in the 13th century. There doesn't seem to be any source for it in Chazal, but it's a beautiful idea, he says. Let's find kapitelach in Tehillim that are thematically related to the day so that we can further express or indulge in the theme of the day. And that would explain why in Rosh Chodesh we say Borchi Nafshi, and it would explain why on Chanukah we say Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis L'David. Now, the Tur cites the minhag also as part of a larger minhag of reciting any kapitel of Tehillim, any psalm that is minyana diyoma, that is related thematically to the day. And this is in Siman, it's just jumped down to Kuf Lamed, Siman Kuf Lamed Gimel in the Tur. And he writes that this is a minhag in all of Spain. So I guess by the time that the Tur is writing this, it had spread out beyond the community of Toledo and had gone into other Spanish communities as well. The Tur writes, "Uvisfarad nohagim b'chol yom achar kaddish, lomar mizmor hatei Hashem oznacha aneni v'kaddish acharav." Then they say kaddish afterwards. Ve'achar kach aleinu l'shabeach, u'b'chol zman u'zman mishanin hamizmor lefi inyano. And he says every day they will change the kapitel based upon inyana diyoma, based upon the theme of the day. Kigon Borchi Nafshi b'Rosh Chodesh u'chayol tarog al afike mayim b'chol hamoed u'mizmor Chanukas Habayis b'Chanukah Uvepurim lamasech alayelas hashachar uminhag tov hu. Quoting the Sefer HaManhig, he says this is a proper minhag. The Tur in Orach Chaim further codifies this specifically in relation to Rosh Chodesh, and he writes therefore in Siman Taf Chaf Gimel, he says, "V'noagin bisfarad lomar mizmor borchi nafshi lefi sheyesh bo asay yarech lamoadim." He says, and this is the reason why. Now it seems like that the Tur gives a little bit of extra emphasis to Rosh Chodesh, which is in itself a little bit of a mystery, and the Shulchan Aruch itself, in Siman Tav Chaf Gimel, in chapter 423 in the Shulchan Aruch, also gives greater prominence to the recitation of Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh, more so than the other kapitulach of Tehillim that the Sefer HaManhig had advocated saying. And that's something else that we want to examine. Why did it develop that Rosh Chodesh specifically was singled out as the one that the Shulchan Aruch likes more, sort of accentuates more as the time to say a special psalm of Tehillim that's related thematically to the day. And so if you take a look in the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Tav Chaf Gimel Sif Gimel, at the very last line of that Sif, it says, Va'omer Mizmor Hashem Borchi, or Mizmor Borchi Nafshi Es Hashem. Now, the only dissenting opinion, even though the Shulchan Aruch has paskin this way, without any counter voice from the Ramah, we have the Magen Avraham. And the Magen Avraham says cryptically the following few words. He says the following 5 words. Uviktsas makomos ein nohagin kain. That the Magen Avraham says in a few places the minhag is not to do this. He doesn't give us a reason why. He doesn't tell us what the source for his Ksas Makomos ein nohagin kain. The Machzis HaShekel does not comment on it. And so we have to try and understand, and if anyone has any other sources that they would like to present, please feel free after the shir to do your own research. But it's not clear why the Magen Avraham feels that there are some places who don't say it, and he feels that it's worthwhile for us to be aware of the fact that B'Ksas Makomos ein nohagin kain. Well, the question is, why not? Why would we not have a minhag to say Borchi Nafshi? It sounds from the Sefer HaManhig that's a beautiful minhag. Very, very appropriate. Helps us get into the theme of the day. There's one self-apparent reason, in that Borchi Nafshi is only one psalm out of many that should be recited on special days. So there's a certain inconsistency to the minhag. As I mentioned, if you only say Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh and you don't say Lamnatseach alayelat hashachar on Purim, and you don't say Mizmor Shechan Akasabayis LeDavid on Chanukah, and you don't say Kayol Tarog Alafike Mayim on Chol HaMoed. Whereas if you're just doing Rosh Chodesh, it's sort of like, hey, what's going on? It's sort of like an indictment of, if you're going to say it on Rosh Chodesh, why not say it on other days as well? So that could be, at face value, that could be why the Magen Avraham brings such a minhag, that in B'Ksas Makomos Eina Nohagin Kain. However, I think that there is a compelling reason why Rosh Chodesh has special prominence, as far as why we should say Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh, even if we're not saying special kapitulach on other holy or semi-holy days. And if you take a look at the Masei Rav that's printed in the Siddur of the Vilna Gaon, that was published by his Talmidim, where they talked about the minhagim of the Vilna Gaon. And the truth is, the reason why I looked here is because I know that Rabbi Taub was very fond of instituting minhagim of the Gra for the Bayit. And so I said to myself, perhaps I'll find something in the Masei Rav which sheds light on why we don't say Borchi Nafshi here. But that was not to be the case. If anything, there was only a reinforcement of the importance of saying Borchi Nafshi in the Masei Rav of the students of the Vilna Gaon. And if you take a look in Masei Rav Sifkat and Kuf Nun Zayin, it says, this is the halachas of Rosh Chodesh, and this is on page 3 of your handout. He says, Ein omrim shir shel yom. You do not say the shir shel yom on Rosh Chodesh according to the Vilna Gaon. Why? Because the Vilna Gaon shita is that you only say one kapitel of Tehillim at the end of davening. You don't say more than one. Not like so many of us do, let's say during Chodesh Elul, where we'll say the shir shel yom and then we'll say the David Hashem Ori, or we'll say the Shir Shel Yom and the Borchi Nafshi, etc. But the Vilna Gaon's minhag was you only say one shir shel yom. I wonder if he had people with shpilkas at the end of davening in his minyan also. Maybe, I don't know. But in any event, he says, Va'omrim b'mekomo b'beis yomim de Rosh Chodesh Borchi Nafshi. And instead of the shir shel yom, you say on both days of Rosh Chodesh, you're supposed to say the Borchi Nafshi. Shehu shir shel Rosh Chodesh. Because it is the song of Rosh Chodesh. And it supplants the shir shel yom. V'doiche afilu shel Shabbos upshita shel Chanukah. It overrides the shir shel yom of even Shabbos. So even when Rosh Chodesh coincides with Shabbos, you would not say Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos. You'd say only Borchi Nafshi, according to the Gra. And furthermore, it goes without saying that if there's anything to be said on Chanukah, like Mizmor Shir, and Chanukah coincides, Rosh Chodesh Teves would coincide with one of the days of Chanukah, you would say only Borchi Nafshi and not Mizmor Shir Chanukah Savayis L'David. Now the question is why? What gives Rosh Chodesh special prominence that its kapitel should be recited with a greater level of greater weight than any other prayer? Why do we have to reaffirm Rosh Chodesh in that way? So if you take a look at the Vilna Gaon, the Meiser Rab itself quotes a Gemara in Sukkah, which I did not publish for you, because the Gemara in Sukkah talks about it brings a brisa that when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh coincide, the Shira of Rosh Chodesh takes priority over the Shira of Shabbos. Now, the Shira that the Gemara is talking about over there is the Shira that the Levium would sing in the temple. In a number of places in Shas, including Masechet Sofrim is one of the most prominent places, but also in a couple of places in Masechet Sukkah, and in a few other places as well, and at the end of Maseches Tamid in the Mishnayos, it discusses the Shir Shalavim Hayu Omrim Beveis HaMikdash. Now we have this in the Pitum HaKetoris that we recite on Shabbos. It says, Bayom HaRishon Hayu Omrim, Lashem Haaretz U'Meloa, Bayom HaSheni Hayu Omrim, right, etc., etc. And we do a semblance of that every time we say the Shir Shel Yom on the weekdays, is that we go according to that Mishnah in Tamid that we quote in the Pitum HaKetoris when we say the Shir Shel Yom. But it's more involved than that because there was a special shir that the Levium used to recite during the offering of the special Rosh Chodesh Karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara says, the Brisa says, that when Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos coincide, the special shira that the Levium would say would be doche, and there's some controversy in the Gemara whether the word doche over there means it would completely supplant, or whether it would take kedima, or whether it would take priority as far as the order, as how it's said. Either you say the Rosh Chodesh one first, you say the Shabbos one second, or you completely say only the Rosh Chodesh one, and you don't say the Shabbos one at all. That's the discussion in the Gemara. But the point is that the Brisa asks the question, why? Especially in the face of the fact that normally we say, Tadir v'sheino tadir, Tadir kaida. That if you have two mitzvahs to do, one is more frequent than the other, which one should you do first? You should do the more frequent one first. So if anything, if you have a Shabbos kapitel and a Rosh Chodesh kapitel, you should always say the Shabbos kapitel first, and the Rosh Chodesh kapitel, which is only once a month, you should say that second. So the Gemara asks that question, and the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Leida shehukva Rosh Chodesh bizmano. And this is important so that people can know that Rosh Chodesh was established at its proper time. If you want to look up the Gemara in Sukkah, it's Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis in Maseches Sukkah, and I apologize for not having it in front of you in your sheets. Sukkah Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis. The Gemara says that there's a certain priority that we place upon the prominence of Rosh Chodesh in our liturgy, because we need to reaffirm to the masses that we got Rosh Chodesh right. And like Rashi explains, he says there's a special inyan for Beis Din to make sure, to reinforce to the masses that we did not make any errors in our calculation of when Rosh Chodesh is. Now, of course, you have to put this in the context of the history of when this Bryce is being written, which could be at the end of the Second Temple era, or shortly after the Churban, where there's a very, very strong Sadducee community, which is vying for control of the Jewish calendar, and there's a tremendous amount of argumentation revolving around Kiddush HaChodesh, and whoever holds the keys of the chronology of the Jewish calendar really sort of has the upper hand in being the voice of the Jewish people. So therefore, there's always an added emphasis, especially inside the Beis HaMikdash, which becomes, at the end of the Second Temple era, a battleground for the Pharisees versus the Sadducees, to reaffirm that the Beis in the Sanhedrin, who was convening in the Beis HaMikdash, got it right and knows exactly when Rosh Chodesh is, even though they rely on a special Masorah that's based on Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay? So that's why, even though normally Tadar B'Sheinu Tadar Tadar Kodem, the Rosh Chodesh Shira takes priority even over Shabbos, and therefore the Vilna Gaon says, if you're only going to be saying one, which he holds as the proper minhag, you should always say Borchi Nafshi over any other Shir Shel Yom. So Borchi Nafshi, according to the Gra, is the Shir Shel Yom of Rosh Chodesh, and it takes priority over any other Shir Shel Yom. With this Gra in mind, it makes very good sense why the Shulchan Aruch would give prominence to Rosh Chodesh as being a special day of reciting Tehillim, more so than Purim and Chanukah and Chol HaMoed, etc., etc. Because the Shulchan Aruch wants to follow this Gemara in Sukkah, which says that there's a special added emphasis to the publicizing of the date of Rosh Chodesh to the masses. Yes, Gerard?
But we don't know if it was Borchi Nafshi they said.
That's correct. We don't know that it was Borchi Nafshi. That's an excellent point. Hold on to your yarmulke. We're going to get to that in just a second, okay? But at least we know that the special Shir Shel Yom that was recited by the Levium had the one that they said for Rosh Chodesh had special prominence. Okay? Great. Okay. Now, let's go to Gerard's point. The Ramami Pano, also another great Italian, this is really one of the early Achronim, but a great Italian rabbinic leader, and he writes a tshuva regarding the shir that the Levim Hayu Omrim. And he has a very interesting perspective. He says that we, in Klal Yisrael today, which is the early 16th century, or the early 17th century, I should say, have a very strange minhag. We've altered the liturgy from the way that it originally appeared in the temple. In the Beis HaMikdash, the Levium used to have certain liturgical psalms that they would recite, and we've altered those liturgical psalms for the needs of our day. So let's take a look and see what the Ramami Pano says, and it's on page 1. It's your second source. This is Tshuva Chafei, and the Shailos of Tshuvas Ramami Pano. And he says as follows. He says, B'shirei haLeviyim shanu noyagim la'omrim bebeis hakneses, regarding to the songs of the Levim, that we oftentimes have a minhag to mimic what the Levim used to do in the Beis HaMikdash, in the liturgy that we recite in the shul. Ani monati b'mekomi shelo yiftach shatz b'loshon mishnah desof tamid hamascheles hashir hashahi Levim omrim v'chulei ela yasplo mirosh hamizmor. It says, I want to tell you the first rule that I've done to change the institution that is recorded in Maseches Tamid as far as what the Levim used to recite in the temple. In Maseches Tamid, it records that the Levim only used to recite either one or more psukim, but starting from the middle of the kapitel of Tehillim. And the Ramami Pano says that I have instituted the rule that whenever we take a kapitel that the Levim used to recite in the Beis HaMikdash, even though they may have only said one or two psukim from the kapitel, we start from the beginning of the paragraph. That's the first rule that I've instituted. So therefore, we don't start, let's say, Vayom HaRishon Hayu Omrim Lashem Haaretz Umloa. Right? That's what it says in the Mishnah and Talmud. But our minhag is to say LeDavid Mizmor. We start from the very beginning and we go to the very end. We don't take extractions from the paragraph like the Levium used to do. We say the whole thing. And he says, She'im hu mechavein, she'im hu mechuvan, I should say. Ima shehayu haLevim omrim ba'etahi mutav. He says, because if indeed what we are saying is to align ourselves with what the Levium used to say, then we're covering our bases in that respect. V'ilav, but if not, and I think the if not is that if it could be argued that there is perhaps something incorrect about mimicking the practice of the Levium in the Beis HaMikdash, because perhaps we are not supposed to do practices that are imitative of what was done in the Beis HaMikdash, lest someone make the mistake and think that we have our own temple. So I'm conjecturing here that that may be the concern of the Rama Mipano, that just like we're not supposed to construct Klei HaMishkan and Klei HaMikdash outside of the temple, we're not supposed to do exactly the liturgical patterns of what was done in the Beis HaMikdash, but only a semblance of them. And therefore, lo gara mimizmor ba'alma ve'eno motzi mipiv sheker. And if not, if we're not supposed to be imitative of what the Levium did, then it's not so bad either, because we're just saying a kapitel tehillim. And if we're just saying a kapitel tehillim, we're not saying sheker, we're not saying falsehood, we're not doing something that we shouldn't be doing. He says, and now, he realizes that what he's saying is a bit controversial, that he's sort of making these institutional changes to the liturgy from what is recorded in the Mishnah. He says, I want to make sure that this is acceptable or pleasant to my listener. That you should first of all know that I'm relying first and foremost on what is recorded in Maseches Sofrim, which says that the Mishnah in Maseches Sofrim says itself that if a person is unfamiliar with what the Levium used to say, or if a Levi would be working in the Beis HaMikdash, and the Levi would be unfamiliar with the proper Shira to say, there was a catch-all Shira that the Levi himself could say. And that was a kapitel of Odeh Hashem b'chol levav. I will praise Hashem with all my heart. Vidayo, and that's enough. And the Rama Mipano compares it to brachos. And he says, what if you're not sure what bracha to make? We have catch-all brachas just like we have catch-all liturgical psalms. Right? What's the catch-all bracha to make if you don't know what bracha to make? Make a shahakol. He says, he says, just like if you say a shahakol on any food, b'di'evid your yotze. He says, and therefore, based on that, v'hirshinu la'atzmeinu l'takein b'beis hakneses seder kavua l'rabim im chiluf ma miminhag haLeviim. And therefore, I have found it fit to institute certain liturgical changes for our modern synagogue, which is patterned in some way, a semblance of what was done in the times of the temple by the Levium, but not exactly. Ki omnam b'musaf Shabbos, Tumur of Hazivlach, v'chein b'mincha b'makom shiras hayam v'habe'er, sidarnu kan v'kan odeh Hashem b'chol levav. He says, if you look carefully in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, you're going to discover that the Gemara talks about that the Levium, when they would recite Shir on Shabbos afternoon, they would recite psukim from Parshas Ha'azinu. Now, no one does that today, and that was not instituted in the synagogues even before the Rama Mipano. So he says, I don't feel that there's any problem for me to say that instead we say the generic kapitel of Odeh Hashem b'chol levav, I will praise God with all my heart. Now, what's going to become clear is that this is written at a time when Sidurim are not in great availability, as you know. So to have special liturgical psalms that are recited at different days, where there's a lot of interchangeability, and I noticed that it's quite warm in here, and people are starting to fall asleep. So if we can open these doors, that would be great. And if someone knows how to adjust the heat, that would also be great, because I'm about to fall asleep. He says we've seen fit to institute a generic kapitel for so many other times. Let's say on Shabbos, when the Gemara advocates saying one thing, it turns out that we do something different. And it could be, as we'll see in just a moment, that he doesn't want to shter the olam. In other words, people don't have, Tanakh at their fingertips. And so sometimes we have to compromise with creating prayers that are better known to the masses, that can be recited on a more regular basis, because if we try to get too fancy with our liturgy, we're going to be leaving everyone else in the dust. So therefore he says, and furthermore, the Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Nun Hey, tells you that the Levium used to recite a different shir every day of Chol HaMoed Sukkos to correspond to the different karbanos that were brought on every day Chol HaMoed Sukkos. We don't do that, says the Rama Mipano. You know what we do? We stick to the standard Shira that the Levium said on the first day of Sukkot, and we say that every single day on Chol HaMoed Sukkot. And he says the reason is because he says Mipnei Hatiruf Asher Yargonu Sheye'ara L'Tzibur V'Lav Shliach B'Seder Homi Behi. He says, and it's because I was worried, says the Ramami Pan, that if we were to start instituting these liturgical changes in great detail on every day of Sukkot, it would fardre everybody. No one would know what the proper thing to say is. People would get confused, and people wouldn't know what to do. So sometimes you have to compromise on the liturgy if you're going to end up leaving the congregation in the dust. Right? That's the principle that the Ramami Pano was working with. Right? Is that clear? Can you repeat this? It says, Chodesh l'musaf l'mincha sidanu Borchi Nafshi gadalta me'od. And he says, now on Rosh Chodesh, at Musaf and Mincha, we make sure that everyone says Borchi Nafshi. Al pi ha-medrash ha-ne'elam, because there's a medrash that talks about the wonders of God's creation. Kilo matzano b'gemara seder hashir. Gerard, look at the Ramami Pano. What does he say? He says that we don't find anywhere in Shas that the Levium ever said Borchi Nafshi. We don't find that they ever said Borchi Nafshi. V'nachonu, but it's still proper. V'afal pisha b'masech esofrim zachru bo v'yashev aleim es onam mikol malkom Borchi Nafshi adiflan. And he says, even though when you look at Masech Esofrim, you will find, I believe it's chapter 19 in Masech Esofrim, you will discover, or chapter 18 or 19 in Masech Esofrim, you'll discover that there was a different kapitel Tehillim that was said by the Levium on Rosh Chodesh, which has the words Vayashev Aleihem Es Onam, that God places upon them their iniquity, right? Which is part of a different kapitel Tehillim that we say in a different Shir Shel Yom. Nevertheless, Borchi Nafshi is more appropriate to Rosh Chodesh, and therefore I've seen fit to institute it instead of what Masech Esofrim advocates for Rosh Chodesh, which he doesn't say why it's Adiflan. He just says there's a medrash that I'm relying upon that states that Borchi Nafshi is an amazing tefillah. Like we've seen already, that it has these amazing themes in it about creation, in addition to the whole concept of the moon being created by God as a means of calculating the Jewish calendar. He had a minhag to say it both on Rosh Chodesh morning and Rosh Chodesh Mincha as well. Now, this Ramami Pano could also be the Magen Avram's reason for hesitation. Because out of all of the kapitelach that are listed to recite as a supplementary liturgical psalm at the end of davening, Borchi Nafshi is the only one that does not have a source with what in Shas, in consonance with what the Levium used to say in the Beis HaMikdash. I shouldn't say it's the only one. I haven't checked thoroughly all of Masech Esofrim to be able to affirm that. But clearly, where the Ramami Pano says Borchi Nafshi is not the one that's advocated by the Mishnah in Masech Esofrim. The Mishnah in Masech Esofrim says Levium says something totally different. So maybe that's the reason why the Magen Avram has a problem with saying Borchi Nafshi, because it's not consistent with what is brought by Chazal. Now, that's something else. We have to see if that could be a reason why we should not say Borchi Nafshi as well, despite its great thematic ideas. Let's take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan for just a second. Take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan. It's on page 2 in your sheet. We're going to see. We're going to look at two sections from the Aruch HaShulchan. One is in Siman Kuf Lamed Gimel. The first thing that the Aruch HaShulchan says in Sif Beis is that the Levium used to recite Shir every morning after the bringing of the Korban Tamid in the morning, and they used to recite Shir in the afternoon after the bringing of the Korban Tamid Shel Bein HaRabbayim. And we have a zecher to remind ourselves of what the Levium used to do in the Beis HaMikdash, that we recite a Shir Shel Yom every morning to remind us of what the Levium used to do in the Beis HaMikdash. And that's why we say, Hayom Yom Rishon B'Shabbos, Shavo Hayu HaLeviim Omrim B'Beis HaMikdash. That's what we say in the Shir Shel Yom, right? One of the questions that we have to ask ourselves is that why is it that we don't say a separate Shir Shel Yom for the Musaf Karban? Because when you look carefully in the Gemara and in Masech Esofrim, you'll discover that not only did the Levium say a special shir for the Korban Tamid every day, but they also said a special shir for the Korban Musaf that was brought on Rosh Chodesh and on Shabbos and on Yom Tov and so forth.
Isn't that the Ramami Pano?
What's that?
Isn't that the Ramami Pano?
Well, the Ramami Pano, there should be a consistency. The Ramami Pano says he feels at liberty that you can change everything. If that's the case, then why do we say Shabo Hayu Alavim Omerim Bebeis HaMikdash? If we're trying to mimic what the Levims do in the Beis HaMikdash, so, and that's part of our liturgy, so then why, when we say Musaf, why don't we also say a Shir Shel Yom of the Musaf Korban? And we only say the Shir Shel Yom of the Korban Tamid. That's question number one. Question number two the Aruch HaShulchan asks is, if indeed this is to correspond, the Shir Shel Yom should correspond to the Korban Tamid that was brought in the morning, so then why do we wait until the end of Musaf to say the Shir Shel Yom? We should do like Nusach Sfard, he says, which is to recite the Shir Shel Yom after Shacharis before Kriyas Torah. And that's what a lot of people do, not just on Rosh Hashanah, but to Minhag Nusach Sfard is to say the Shir Shel Yom after Shacharis before Kriyas Torah. And he says that's more logical when you think about it, because after all, it's corresponding to the Tamid Shel Shachar, not corresponding to the Korban Musaf, which had a different shir. He doesn't answer that question. Yeah.
Did the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim have a separate shir or the same shir?
It sounds like from I don't remember what it says in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. He says, but it seems like he says that if you take a look. He says we don't have a minhag to say it at Mincha, even though at Mincha they had their own shir. It sounds like it was a different shir that they had at Mincha. And he brings it from a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. So it sounds like he says we only have a minhag to do it in the morning, not a minhag to do it in the afternoon. But he still says I don't understand why we don't do it at Musaf. And if we're not going to do it at Musaf, then why do we say the Shir Shel Yom and put it after Musaf? So he says, and then he says in Sif Gimel, he says as follows. He says, "Va'anachnu lo nahagnu kain." He says, we don't do like the Sfardim, who say the Shir Shel Yom after Shacharis. We do it after Musaf. He says, "V'hu pele." He says, I don't understand why. And furthermore, we also don't have a minhag to say the Shir of Musaf. He says it's a pele. I don't get it. He says. V'hasfardim, then he quotes the Sfardim. He says, the Sfardim omrim b'rosh chodesh borchi nafshi, shehu shir shel musaf. He says, the minhag of the Sfardim is to say borchi nafshi every Rosh Chodesh, u'v'yom tov gam him ein omrim. But he says that on Yom Tov, even the Sfardim who say borchi nafshi on Rosh Chodesh do not say a special shil shayom for Yom Tov. And he says, v'lo yadati lama. That I also don't understand why. He's up to like 3 questions on all these different minhagim, why they're like all out of sync. He says, "V'gam tamiyali shebemusar Shabbos muvor b'Rosh Hashanah shehayomrim shir mi parshas hazinu v'masech asor from loka chashivla." He says it's very clear that from the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that they used to say a special shir from parshas ha'azinu on Shabbos morning. And we don't do that. And it's not even brought down in Maseches Sofrim. V'gam osam ha'omrim b'yom tov shirei musaf v'chvar nitfusu b'machzorim v'lama b'Shabbos ein mi sheyomrei. He says, and even there are certain liturgical psalms that have even been printed to this very day in Machzorim, but no one says them. B'tzarach iyun gadol. And the Aruch HaShulchan leaves off with, I have no idea why this is. I don't know. It's just the minhag started the way it started. Well, first of all, to answer the minhag is why Sfardim dafka say Borchi Nafshi as the liturgical hymn for Rosh Chodesh, and they don't say liturgical hymns for any other Yom Tov or Shabbos, for the Shir Shel Yom for that holy day. We can go back to the Gra and say this emphasis on Rosh Chodesh is a necessary imperative because the announcement of Rosh Chodesh needs to be done. So I don't have such a problem with that kasha. But later on, the Aruch HaShulchan, and this is really to create a contrast to the Ramami Pano. Remember that we quoted the Ramami Pano, who said that there really is no source for saying Borchi Nafshi in the words of Chazal on Rosh Chodesh. So comes along the Aruch HaShulchan and he says, and this is the bottom, it's in Siman Tav Chav Dalet Siv Gimel. He says, B'simin HaKodem Timihani, Mai Delo Chashiv L'Maseches Sofrim Shir Musaf Shel Rosh Chodesh. He says, it seems He says, I had a question. In Maseches Sofrim, it goes through every different yontif, the special shir shel yom that they would say for Musaf. And when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, that shir shel yom for Musaf is missing. And I didn't understand why that is. So he writes, the Nirali, the Shamreish Perak Yutes, Isa uva Rosh Hashanah Omer Kol Hamim Tikuchav, B'Yom HaKippurim Borchi Nafshi Umimamakim Kerasicha. That it says in Maseches Sofrim that on Rosh Hashanah the Shir Shal Yom for Musaf is Kol Ha'amim Tikuchav, which is what we say before Tkiyah Shofar. On Yom Kippur we say Borchi Nafshi, and we also say the capital of Shir HaMalos Mimamakim Kerasicha Hashem. And B'Chag HaSukkos Noda Ba-Yehuda V'chulei. And on Sukkos we say the capital that has certain allusions to the Chag HaSukkot, which is Noda Ba-Yehuda. Ve'ino muvan, so says the Aruch HaShulchan, I don't understand. My inyan Borchi Nafshi Yom HaKippurim. He says, what's the connection between Borchi Nafshi and Yom Kippur? And he writes the Hagra Mochakzeh, he says the Vilna Gaon's Girsa of Maseches Sofrim even actually erases Borchi Nafshi for that very reason. He says, Va'od al Haskalashu Shomer V'Rosh Hashanah. He said, it also makes no sense why the Mishnah starts with the letter Vav Uve Rosh Hashanah when it's really starting a new topic. And therefore he concludes and he says, V'lochein nirali dekach tzarech lomar. The Aruch HaShulchan says a big chiddush. He says he believes that there is a Tos Sofer in the Maseches Sofrim that we have available to us. And therefore he writes that B'Rosh Chodesh Borchi Nafshi, that the correct girsa in Maseches Sofrim is that the Shir Shal Yom of Rosh Chodesh in the temple that the Levim used to recite was Borchi Nafshi. Uva Rosh Hashanah Omer Kol Ha'amim, and on Rosh Hashanah, that's why the Vav, because Rosh Chodesh was really listed first. And on Rosh Hashanah you say, Kol Ha'amim Tikuchav, the theme of Rosh Hashanah. Uvi Yom HaKippur, Mimamakim V'chulei. And on Yom Kippur, there's only one capital, which is Mimamakim Kerasicha, Hashem, from the depths I call you, O God, because I'm in trouble on Yom Kippur. Right? So he transposes the whole thing. Borchi Nafshi really has nothing to do with Yom Kippur. It got stuck there by accident. Rosh Chodesh got deleted from the very beginning of the Mishnah, and this is how the Mishnah is really supposed to read. Ulefizeh Shapir Hizkir Shir Musav Shal Rosh Chodesh. And now it's clear that in Maseches Sofrim it does list the Shir Shal Yom of Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, and the Ramah Mipano is now sort of opposed by the Aruch HaShulchan. Because the Ramah Mipano says Borchi Nafshi really has no source, but he says, I'm not bothered by that, it's the right thing to say. Comes along the Aruch HaShulchan and he says, no. He says, really, the correct girsa is that in Maseches Sofrim, that is the girsa. That on Rosh Chodesh you say Borchi Nafshi, and that was precisely what the Levim did in the Beis HaMikdash. So to respond to the Magen Avraham, whose reason for saying Uviktsas Mekomos Einam Noagim Kain is because there's no source in the words of Chazal for saying Borchi Nafshi and Rosh Chodesh, we now have the Aruch HaShulchan, who seems to say, no, you just got the girsa wrong. And really, if you had the correct girsa of Maseches Sofrim, you would know that this is a legitimate text that was recited in the Beis HaMikdash even on Rosh Chodesh as well. So let's just see where we are. Number one, the Sefer Hamanik thinks it's a great idea to say it. Number two, the Torah and Shulchan Aruch say it's a great idea to say it. It's beautiful. Asa Yareach L'Moadim. That Hashem created the moon for the festivals, and that's right up the alley, the whole theme of Rosh Chodesh. The Aruch HaShulchan says it's also a nice minute to say Borchi Nafshi, even though he feels it's inconsistent to only say it for Rosh Chodesh and not for other Musaf Shiras, but he's not sure why. And it's clear from the language of the Aruch HaShulchan that his minhag in his community was not to say it, because he said the Sfardim say it. So what does he mean to say when he says the Sfardim say it? He means to say that in our Kehillah they don't say it. Okay? But he still thinks it's a good idea. The Gra could help us understand, as we mentioned before from the Masei Rav, why it's important to say Borchi Nafshi over other liturgical hymns for other holy days, based upon this Gemara in Sukkah that says there's an imperative to publicize Rosh Chodesh. And the only dissenter that we have to not say Borchi Nafshi, who is cryptic and doesn't even provide a reason for us, and really is sort of asking us to sort of decode and figure out a reason why not to say it, is the Magen Avraham. And he only brings that it's in Ktsas Makomos who don't say it. And it would seem that the Magen Avraham is suggesting that Rov Tefutzos, that even though Ktsas Makomos doesn't mean Rov Makomos. He doesn't say Ve'ein anu noagin kain. He says Ktsas Makomos and noagin kain. So it sounds like that Rov Makomos, Rob Tfutzos Yisrael, do say it. And furthermore, that seems to be the minhag in most of Klal Yisrael today. So based on that, and based upon the bracha that I got from Rabbi Taub to say, we're not really sure why we instituted the minhag in the first place, not to say Borchi Nafshi, we are going to reinstitute or institute the recital of Borchi Nafshi to enable us to contemplate on creation for just a few more minutes at the end of Shacharis on Rosh Chodesh. Now I know for many of you,
End of Musaf or Shachar?
at the end of Musaf, because it's the Shir Shal Yom of Musaf, the Borchi Nafshi. I know that for many of you on Rosh Chodesh, you're running out of shul already by Aleinu, if not earlier, because you got to get off to work. So this may be a moot point for some of you who will not be around for Borchi Nafshi, let alone for the Shir Shal Yom. But I would suggest to you that even if you can't make it to the end of Shacharis, look at the words of the Borchi Nafshi. They're absolutely magnificent. And they will help you to appreciate Hashem's Bria all the more. And there's one other thing that I wanted to say, and that is it always bothered me. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari has his fifth mimer. He wrote a book. His book is of 5 parts. And the fifth part, the final part, is really an exposition on Greek philosophy primarily. But before he goes off onto Greek philosophy, in the 10th section of this dialogue between himself and the king, he goes on to a long exposition of an analysis of the Shir of Borchi Nafshi. He talks about the wonders of creation that the author of Borchi Nafshi was able to discuss and describe. And it bothered me. So why is Rabbi Yehuda Halevi sort of devoting a sefer that is about Jewish theology and devoting a large section of it to Parshanut, to biblical exegesis, to explain the meaning of one Psalm, Psalm 104, where he doesn't do this anywhere else in the sefer, and he doesn't attempt to give offer any Parshanut for any other section of Tanakh. And it dawned on me when I was doing the research for this, where did the Sefer HaManhig see this minhag first being instituted for saying Borchi Nafshi on Rosh Chodesh? In Tuli Tula, right? In Toledo. Where did Rabbi Yehuda Halevi spend a large portion of his life as both a yeshiva bacher and a rav? In Toledo, in Spain. This is where he came from. It's where he spent a large portion of his life. And it could be that he himself felt a sense of great pride of the minhag of his makom, and he wanted to be able to emphasize it and to extol it and to explain the great beauty of this minhag that he had been witness to in Toledo. And so that in itself is part of the reason. Now I just want to mention one other point. First, unless there are some questions, first I'll take a couple of questions if there are any. And if not, I want to go to the next point of the shir. Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Why don't we say it on Shabbos?
What? What's that?
Why don't we say it on Shabbos?
Why don't we say it?
Shir Amal.
Okay. It's a good segue. You're not planted, are you? You're not a plant. No, I didn't. We didn't collude for you to ask this question at this point. So the question is, why don't we say Borchi Nafshi Shabbos afternoon? There are plenty of things that are in the Siddur that we just have a minhag to say. We don't say that, right? That's, if you ask someone, what's your minhag? My minhag is not to say that, right? Where did that minhag come from? I don't know. We just don't say it. And the question is, where did that minhag come from? I don't know. We just never said it. One of those things that we just never said was the Borchi Nafshi and the Shir Amaluses that are at the end of Mincha. And the question is, what is Borchi Nafshi doing over there? What is it doing at the end of Mincha on Shabbos afternoon? And why was it instituted? So the Lavush discusses this minhag, and I believe that that's I don't know if there's any earlier source than the Lavush for the recitation of Borchi Nafshi Shabbos afternoon. But it's worthwhile just to take a quick look at what the Lavush says. The Lavush, first of all, in Siman Tov Tzadi Gimel, and I believe this has direct bearing upon our discussion of Borchi Nafshi and Rosh Chodesh, as we'll see momentarily. The Levush, it's on the bottom of page 1 in your sheet, says, V'yesh mekomos she'en omrim osam elapam achas ad Shavuos. The topic of the Levush is the study of Pirkei Avos on Shabbos afternoon in the summer, between Pesach and Shavuos. And he writes that there are some communities where they only recite Pirkei Avos once from Pesach until Shavuos. And he says, V'yesh mekomos shechozru maschilin la'omrim achar Shavuos v'omrim osam kol yemei hakayetz. There are other communities where they don't stop on Shavuos, but they restart Pirkei Avos after they've completed, by saying one parak a week in the 6 Shabbatot that are between Pesach and Shavuos. They start Pirkei Avos again, says the Levush, and they go through Pirkei Avos several times. Was it 3 times, I think, we go through Pirkei Avos from Shavuos to Rosh Hashanah. I don't remember how many times. And we end up saying Pirkei Avos a few more times over the course of the summer. He says, why is that? Shekaven shehipsiku lomar Borchi Nafshi ein chozrin lomar oso adzmano shehu Shabbos Bereshis. The reason why we commence with Pirkei Avos throughout the summer is because since we already stopped saying Borchi Nafshi at Pesach, we got some white noise in the middle of Mincha, at the end of Mincha. We used to be saying Borchi Nafshi right after Mincha, and then we stopped saying it on Pesach. So we might as well fill that space, that gap, with something else that's meaningful. So we'll stick in Pirkei Avos instead of Borchi Nafshi. And then we stop saying Pirkei Avos when we restart saying Borchi Nafshi, which is the first Shabbos of Parshas, when we start learning Parshas Bereshis right after Simchas Torah. And there's downtime, of course, between Rosh Hashanah and through Sukkot, but that's understandable because those are Yomim Tovim. So he's sort of like you're busy with Yom Tov, so we don't fill up the gaps during those weeks that are between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. Now he says Kamoshi Yisboyer. So the question is, the Levush has only created a bigger mystery, right? Why do we say Borchi Nafshi starting with Shabbos Bereshis, and we only go until Pesach? And then Pesach, we stop saying Borchi Nafshi, and we got to fill it up with something else, so we say Pirkei Avos. What's going on over here? Take a look at the Levush, page 2. This is the Levush in Siman Tov Reish Samech Tes. And the Levush here is talking about Shabbos HaGadol. Excuse me, he's talking about Shabbos Bereshis. I beg your pardon. The Shabbos immediately after Simchas Torah. He says, L'mincha ba'oso Shabbos noagin lahaschil lomer Borchi Nafshi. He says, that Shabbos is the Shabbos when we start saying Borchi Nafshi at Mincha. V'atam shemaschilin oso b'Shabbos zeh. And the reason why we begin reciting it on this Shabbos of Parshas Bereshis, mishum shekol oto hamizmor medaber b'inyan ma'aseh Bereshis. Because the whole kapitel, the whole theme of Borchi Nafshi, of Psalm 104, is all about the act of creation. Lekach maschilin oso b'Shabbos shel Parshas Bereshis. And that's why we begin to recite it on Parshas Bereshis. V'korin oso misham va'elech b'chol haShabbatot b'mincha. And we can commence reciting it every Shabbos after Parshas Bereshis at Mincha. Kidei lizkor inyan ma'aseh Bereshis ba'afuke yom deShabbos shehu zeicher l'ma'aseh Bereshis. And why then do we say it on Mincha, Shabbos afternoon? Because what is Shabbos after all? Shabbos is Zeicher L'Maaseh Bereshis. It's a reminder of the act of creation. So Borchi Nafshi fits in perfectly, thematically, with Shabbos. It's almost like if it wasn't the Shir Shal Yom of Rosh Chodesh, it would be the Shir Shal Yom. If Shabbos didn't have its own Shir Shal Yom, then the Borchi Nafshi would be the Shir Shal Yom, because thematically it is so related to the act of creation. Yeah. And then he says, Va'omrim, I skip it till the rest of the underlined section. He says, Va'omrim came Borchi Nafshi b'Shir Amalos ad Shabbos HaGadol. And then you commence reciting Borchi Nafshi every single Shabbos throughout the winter until you get to Shabbos HaGadol. Sha'az noagin lomar b'mincha ha'hagada me'avodim hayinu ad l'chapar l'kol avonoseinu. Because on Shabbos HaGadol, you can't say Borchi Nafshi, you got too much other stuff to say, because the minhag is to recite the Haggadah on Shabbos afternoon, the Shabbos before Pesach, to get yourself ready, thematically, right? Do you understand? Liturgy was designed. Jewish liturgy was designed to get us in the mood of the day. Yeah, do you understand this? I mean, is this, if that's the only thing you get out of the shir tonight, then Dayen. Oh, Dayen, that's interesting. Okay. So anyway, so you recite the Haggadah, at least until Avodim Hayinu, or from Avodim to Ad L'chaper Al Kol Avonoseinu. You do that on Shabbos Hagadol. Therefore, you have to stop Borchi Nafshi. Kedei lizkor gam yetzias Mitzrayim b'yom Shabbos Hagadol shenasa bo nes Hagadol b'Mitzrayim kedei Yisrael simin tov lamed. He says, now the only problem is, okay, fine, Shabbos Hagadol, you didn't say Borchi Nafshi. Then it's Pesach, you don't say Borchi Nafshi on Yom Tovim either. So then the whole summer you're just going to drop it? What, just because you had to stop for the Haggadah for one Shabbos before Pesach, and you say Pesach, okay, so we're putter now until we get to Parshas Bereshis again? That seems to be what the Levush is saying. It's a little bit strange, I admit. It's very strange. Because normally, you'd say, Shabbos afternoon, what else do I got to do? I'm going to play chess, right? What else am I going to do? We can afford to take the extra time. We can say Pirkei Avos, we say Borchi Nafshi, we can say Gan Sefer Tehillim. We still have time. Because it's a long day. So why is it that Borchi Nafshi sort of gets dropped just because of this it almost sounds like a flimsy excuse to stop saying Borchi Nafshi, because we have to stop saying it by Shabbos HaGadol and Pesach, so we'll leave it off the whole summer until we get to the winter. Yeah.
Anyway, you have to do Pirkei Avos, because the whole concept of Pirkei Avos is Kinyan Torah.
No, but the whole point of the Levush was, fine, you want to say do Kinyan Torah, fine, so you'll say it between Pesach and Shavuos. But then the whole summer, he says the reason for the minhag to say Pirkei Avos after Shavuos for the rest of the summer is because we dropped Borchi Nafshi. It's not the other way around. It's not that we're going to drop Borchi Nafshi because we got to say Pirkei Avos.
No, you're doing Pirkei Avos between Pesach and Shavuos anyways.
Fine.
Just a minute.
So pick up Borchi Nafshi
now you had a 6-week break.
No, so 6 weeks, so you're going to drop the whole summer?
So now you're going to do Pirkei Avos because it doesn't make sense to start it except by Yisrael's Bereshis.
Okay, all right. Could be. Okay.